This episode contains conversations surrounding depression, suicidal thoughts. Listener discretion is advised.
Bored in Butler County? Need to know where to catch a show this weekend? What events are even happening in the area? I'm Molly Miller, one of the writers behind the Butler Eagles Weekend Entertainment section, and I'm here to banish the boredom from your cold and rainy days. Sign up and receive Miller Minutes, that's my column, and a list of Butler County-based events direct to your inbox every Thursday afternoon by visiting bit.ly/ButlerEagleWE newsletter. That's bit.ly/ButlerEagleWE newsletter. You can also find the latest events under the A&E tab at www.butlereagle.com. Click Weekend Entertainment, or pick up Thursday's print edition of the paper for the latest events. See, there's lots to do in Butler County when you read the Butler Eagles Weekend Entertainment section. Visit bit.ly/ButlerEagleWE newsletter to sign up for the weekly newsletter, so you won't be bored in Butler County again.
Hello, and welcome to this season of Alter Ego. We are starting season 1 with the topic of addiction in Butler County. Conversations on the physical side of addiction, trauma, the neuroscience, mental health, and stigma surrounding addiction. Experts, resources, and stories from people who have fought addiction head on. I am your host, Laura Crago. Let's keep the conversation going. Now a word from our sponsor, BetterHelp. For a long time, I suffered with depression and anxiety. I had tried therapy before, but struggled finding a therapist I connected with until I found BetterHelp. That's why I am so excited to share BetterHelp's mission to make therapy more affordable and more accessible, because finding a therapist can be hard, especially when you're limited to the options in your area. BetterHelp is a platform that makes finding a therapist easier because it's online. Remote therapy sessions, and by filling out a few questions, BetterHelp can match you to a professional therapist in as little as a few days. It's easy to sign up and get matched with a therapist. Click the link in description and receive 10% off your first month of BetterHelp. And by clicking that link, you support this channel. Plus, you can easily switch to a new therapist at no additional cost without stressing about insurance, who's in your network, or anything like that. I was struggling for a long time, and BetterHelp was where I found my therapist, Whitney, who I still see weekly for almost 2 years now. So, if you're struggling, like I was, consider online therapy with BetterHelp. Click the link in description or go to betterhelp.com/altereagle. That's betterhelp.com/altereagle. There's no better time than now to start your mental health journey. Thank you again, BetterHelp, for supporting this channel. Good morning, happy Monday. Welcome to another episode of Alter Ego. I'm your host, Laura Crago. So I wanted to start this episode with a little bit of a extended intro after I recorded this episode, which is myself and my therapist. I realized that maybe I forgot some things. It's hard to sit down and share your story in a way that people can relate to. I think it's important for us to be open about our struggles, where we're at, and our goals. And that's one of the biggest things I wanted to talk about. And right now, my biggest goal, other than continuing to focus on my mental health, is my finances. I've got some big goals for the future. Now, before I get into this, I did want to give a shout out to one of our listeners who I met in Walmart a few weeks ago. Ida, AIDA. I really hope, darling, that I am saying your name correctly. I was in the dishwasher and soap aisle, and she came up to me. She recognized me right away. She just said that she loved the podcast. She loved what I was talking about. She actually sparked an idea in my brain of some more things I want to get into. So thank you. Thank you so much for coming up to me, and thank you for listening. I appreciate it. We appreciate it here at the Butler Eagle. And I do want to remind you all that, yes, I am an entity of the Butler Eagle. While I am separate, sort of my own department, it's been challenging, right? I feel like I did come in here with a fire in my belly, with a very clear vision. And that can be hard, right? To be the person that comes in with a very clear vision and wanting to be accepted. I take people, I say this all the time, and you might be sick of hearing it, but I'm going to say it again. I take people where they are. I accept them for where they're at in life. I don't expect them to be at my level, above my level. I don't feel as if we're all supposed to be at the same distance as the person next to us. And most of my life, I feel like I sort of did run by that sort of mentality where if someone was 10 steps ahead of me, I was sprinting to catch up, but I was missing all of these things along the way. So I like to sort of refer to myself, when you think of the story of the tortoise and the hare, I want to be the tortoise. I want to be thoughtful. I want to take my time. I want to listen more. And I want to also give myself a little bit of grace for not being perfect, right? Not being as fast as the hare. Although my energy levels typically like the rabbit, but I think it's good to take your time, to be thoughtful, to really take a step back and look at the whole picture. Right now, I am doing that very thing. I have some really big goals in my life. In just the last year, I feel like I've opened myself up to a lot of things. I've had heartbreak. I've had disappointment. I've had a lot of things that I'm not going to get into right now. But when we're thinking about what we want for the future, you can sit here and think about it and dream about it all you want, but you have to sit down and make a list. How do I get there? What steps do I need to take in order to get there? And for me, my biggest goal right now is to sort of tighten up my finances. I have no money saved. I mean, during COVID, I was able to spend money on my car. My car needed repairs. My dog was going to the vet quite a bit, still struggling with his pancreatitis. We were trying to get that under wraps. Really, it was his diet. Any little thing would throw him off. And it felt good to be able to schedule a vet appointment and take him and just be able to pay for it, right? It felt good to know that I was going to be able to pay my rent, which most of the reason why I am in the position I'm in is I've lived in very expensive cities. My rent in Boston was $1,700. That was my rent. That didn't cover my utilities. Now, mind you, I had a gorgeous apartment in Boston. Huge, huge apartment. I had a great roommate. I had two great roommates, actually. My first roommate had to leave, got another opportunity in another city, and a girl that worked for the same company that was moving to Boston, she just ended up being my roommate. It worked out. Everything works out, right? There's no need to stress about, is it going to work out or not? It's going to work out. It might not work out the way that you want it to, but it will work out. Now, I don't feel like I got into enough of my story of moving back to Butler. One of the biggest things was my finances. I knew that I had a safe space to come home to. I had support here, not just to my mom and my stepdad, but I have friends and family who live here. You know, my cousin Allison is also a big connection for me. And there are those people in your life that you don't always get to spend enough time with. But even if you don't spend time with them, you still know that they're going to be there when you need them. But then you also respect their boundaries as well. And, you know, we've learned a lot more about each other as adults living close together again. And it's been really wonderful. But taking care of my mental health, a huge part of that was taking care of my finances. And I was in a position where I didn't feel supported when it came to the mental health aspect. So moving back to Butler, number one was mental health. taking care of myself. I struggled that last year to the point where there were 3 separate times where I seriously considered taking my own life. I knew how I was going to do it, and I knew where I was going to do it. And when you have those thoughts, when you think about the actual action of it, the follow through of it wasn't there. I didn't want to die. People often think that people are taking the easy route out. Having thoughts of taking your own life, it's not an easy route. You get to a point where it feels like it's the only route. There's no other option. No matter what you do in your life, you continue to fail. You continue to let other people down. You're letting yourself down, and you just can't see a way out. Now, I had struggled with these thoughts before in college, but it got pretty bad when I was in Tennessee, to the point where at that last moment, there was a blowout fight. When I say blowout fight, I mean I was being screamed at. I didn't really have an opportunity to speak. And I felt so low. I felt so lost, to the point of going to my room, locking the door. I didn't even turn the lights on. I still remember that. I still remember sitting at my desk. And I went into my closet, which I had made into a sound booth, because I was crying and I was so upset. And I called my mother because I didn't want anyone else in the house to hear me talking on the phone. And I just said, I'm not okay. I have to come to Butler. I need to come to Butler. Can I come and live with you until I find a place, till I get a job? I need to get a therapist. I can't stay here anymore. And she said, okay. And at that moment, I started to feel myself take action. I got on my computer. I started looking up U-Hauls. Now, this was a Thursday night and in August. And I remember thinking, okay, I have to go into work tomorrow and tell them that I'm done. This is my last weekend. It was a part-time job on the weekends in a restaurant on the lake. And I felt so guilty, but inside I was like, no, you have to push past that, because you have to take care of yourself. You cannot stay for 1 more month. I have to leave. Even to the point of where I started packing that night. I started pulling things out, putting things into boxes, into bags. That next day at work, I started gathering up a bunch of extra shipping boxes and different things, took them home, and just began to pack. Had rented the U-Haul for the following Tuesday. Plan was to pick up the U-Haul Tuesday, load it up. Had started asking friends who could help me get the big things in, and then I could get the rest of the stuff in myself. And people showed up. People show up for you if you ask them. You know, you're going to have moments in your life where you're disappointed by people who said that they would be there for you and love you. Life just doesn't work out that way, unfortunately. And I don't mean this to be negative or sad, but I just mean it to say we do grow and change, right? We learn that, maybe it was okay for that, for you or for last year, but it's no longer okay. And unless you're willing to make the changes, then I have to move on. The situation I was in was tough because there's that saying that blood is thicker than water. I'm sorry, I don't believe that. I have met a lot of people in my lifetime who have shown up for me, who have known me for less than a month, who have shown up for me, who have been there to support me and to believe in me without needing anything in return. Don't do something good for someone just to get something out of it. Do it because you want to. Do it because that's who you are. I've always been the type of person that cares about how other people feel. I've always done the right thing. And I found myself in the last couple years shifting away from that. becoming a little bit more selfish in certain situations because, one, the information I had, and two, because I thought, why not? Why not put myself first? Why not be a little selfish here? Why not say yes to me and feel good about this situation because my gut is telling me to go for it? Have I made mistakes? Yes. Have I hurt other people? Absolutely. Am I the villain in some people's stories? Yes, I am. Are those things I'm proud of? No, of course not. No one's proud of being the bad guy or the one that hurt someone else. No one's proud of that. But I'm a human being. I'm human. I'm not perfect. I'm not trying to be perfect. I am trying to be the best version of myself. And sometimes that person is faulty, right? Sometimes that person leads with their heart, which in turn causes hurt for other people. Something I've been able to do in the last couple of years is to communicate exactly how I'm feeling. I think I'm still working on the matter of which I communicate. I have my days, and we all know, right? We have our days where we say what we want to say, but not the way we really want to say it, or the way that we think, would come across as with certainty. To be able to say something with conviction and certainty. Hey, listen, just be honest, right? Just be honest with where you're at right now and with me. That's all we ask, right? And it can be hard. Honesty can be really hard because it can be hurtful. It can also give someone maybe the answer that they're not looking for. But at the end of the day, I have a good heart. I mean well. I want to help. I want to fix, but I also want to be chosen. We all want to be chosen, right? Whether it's the job, the opportunity outside of work, maybe it's the show, maybe it's the team, maybe it's the relationship. Everybody wants to be chosen, right? Because of who they are. They want to be able to have someone that's willing to have those tough times and stick it out. So ultimately, a lot of the conversation that Whitney and I have is realizing things about myself and accepting those things about myself and not apologizing for being who I am. It's not easy to admit that I am someone who has had suicidal thoughts. It's not a proud moment, right? It's not meant to be a proud moment. The only reason I'm sharing it is so someone else out there might not feel alone, might not feel like, hey, you know what? If she can make it through, I can make it through this too. I think we all sort of have those days where we just want to give up, right? You just want to crawl into a hole and be left alone. You have a purpose. You are here for a reason. You deserve to be surrounded by people who support you 100% in whatever crazy ideas you might have or opportunities you might have, to trust you, right? We all want love, but we all want to be trusted. We all want to be supported. We want to feel like we are able to make our own decisions for ourselves and have those people who support that. It's not easy to find. When you find someone that does that, hold on to them. Hold on to those people. I am very much in a place of discovering a lot about myself, a lot about my strengths and my weaknesses, and not feeling bad about it. I'm not sure why I ended up back where I started. Of course, I was one of those people. Yeah, I left and I loved my life, but something was kind of always missing. And I think I'm finding it slowly, one step at a time. But as I go through this process of dealing with my mental health, focusing on my finances for my future goals, which hopefully I will be sharing with you here in the coming months, I want you to do the same. I want you to sit down. I want you to write down the things that you want. And then what can you do to make those things happen? How can you go on to get your master's degree? How can you go on to start that business that you've been wanting to start? How can you go on? It's just not working. How can you leave the job that isn't fulfilling you? How can you move forward? How can you take that first step? Because that's what it is, right? It's a first step. Before that first step, though, a lot of things have to happen. I was in a place of being very mindful of, right now I have a job that's paying the bills. And while I have fun with the people I work with, this is not what I want to be doing. I feel so fortunate to have this job, to have a boss who supports me, who has conversations with me, who's willing to discuss my ideas with me. And she supports a lot of my ideas. And that feels really good. So what I'm going to do moving forward as I go through my mental health journey, which is a constant thing, as I work through some of my new diagnoses, as I work in my finances, and as I work on my love life, I am going to continue to get up in the morning and to be grateful for the life that I do have, for the things that I do have, for the people that are in my life who show up for me, and the people that are willing to support me. Sometimes support comes in small gestures. It doesn't always have to be a grand gesture. Even just the person that's willing to have the conversation with you, to listen to you, to give you support, right? Thank those people. Be grateful for those people. Keep those people in your life. But ultimately, you need to be the one. You need to be able to stand on your own 2 feet and believe in yourself. Being alone, being single has taught me a lot. You need to be able to stand on your own 2 feet and not rely on someone else for your own happiness, but to enhance it. To have someone come into your life who makes you feel these things, it just enhances it. To be able to go to that job where you feel a purpose and a power, even on the hard days, even on the days where you're like, oh man, this is harder than I thought it was going to be, but you're still able to show up. Being able to walk into a room and know that although you've had mistakes in your life and you've maybe not made the best decisions, you're still proud of who you are and how far you've come. Because we're all human. None of us are perfect. You know, this conversation with Whitney, it went good. There's a lot of advice that she has that I'd love for you to hear. So please join me in welcoming my therapist, Whitney Thompson. Well, this is exciting. I'm a little nervous.
I can tell.
Are you nervous?
I'm not.
That's good. Why do you think I'm nervous? I mean, you know I am nervous.
I know why you're nervous.
Why do I overthink everything?
I guess maybe that's something that we should add to your treatment plan.
Yes. So I'm sitting here today with Whitney Thompson. She's my therapist. So Whitney, tell us a little bit about your background and your credentials.
Okay. My education is, I have a bachelor's degree from Penn State in psychology, and I have a master's degree from Capella in mental health counseling. And I'm a licensed professional counselor in the state of Pennsylvania.
And you have your own practice.
I do. I have my own private practice.
Awesome. I was going to say how I started with you. Oh, geez. So this is what I'm nervous about. Well, and Whitney made a really good point before we got started. And this is why, you know, you find that person that you can talk to is that I can edit. So if there is anything, I don't know how that slipped my mind. But yes, if anything goes the way out of, you know, sort of out of where I want it to go, then I can just edit it out. So that's nice to know. Good reminder.
I like that I had to remind you of that.
I'm usually the one reminding people. I think it's just because I'm feeling really vulnerable right now. And, you know, we had kind of I'd say a breakthrough on Friday in my last session.
Sure.
Something that came up that sort of, you know, I've been sitting with all weekend, but I moved back to Butler in August of 2022 with 3 goals in mind. One was really taking care of my mental health, so finding a therapist, because I had already struggled finding someone that I was consistent with, or that they were consistent with me, even, and finding a job, because I needed a job and a place to live. And it can be hard to get space when you live with other people, but especially when you've lived away from home like I had since college, really. I mean, when I went to college, there were summers where I did come home. There were summers where I lived in other places to work, but for the most part, I was gone. And then I stayed up there after school until I booked my first job, and then I left. So I had been gone, and obviously she was excited, as she should be, that I was back, but it was then finding what that meant, because there was a shift in our relationship at that point, right, when I came back. And for me, it was overwhelming because I was trying to figure out what was going on with my life. My life in 2019 was when my life sort of, let's just say, imploded. It felt like it imploded. And then over the course of the next, few years, obviously everyone went through COVID. So a lot of things changed during that time. And while I thought I was getting better, I wasn't taking care of my mental health. I was sort of self-medicating and not having the conversations and figuring out why I felt the way I did about certain things, or why I reacted the way I did in certain situations, which is the breakthrough we had on Friday. And when I moved back, I really didn't have any money. So her reaction was, well, I think you just need to get a job and focus on that right now. And I said, no, I need to make this a priority. I have to talk to someone. When I called my mom and told her that I needed to move home, and basically just said, I'm going to put all my stuff in storage, but can I stay with you? Her and my stepdad, can I stay with you until I find a place to live? That's all I needed to know. I just needed to know that I had somewhere to sleep, and that was it. And if my grandmother were still alive, she would have been the second person I would have called. And the crazy thing is I pulled into my mother's driveway on a Thursday, unloaded my truck on Friday, and on Saturday we actually went to my grandmother's memorial service because she had just passed away at 96 years old. So there was a lot going on there. And I remember our first session. So I found Whitney on BetterHelp, which is one of our sponsors, one of our affiliates for the podcast. And the reason why I wanted to connect with them was because they were willing to work with me financially. I didn't have insurance. I had no idea how I was going to be able to afford talking to somebody, but I knew I needed to talk to somebody. And I found Whitney. And the great thing on there is you can read their credentials. And then when I eventually did get insurance and I realized I wanted to go meet her in person, I decided I wanted to support her, through her private practice. And
yeah, I mean, we just happen to be neighbors. It doesn't typically happen that way, but yeah, she's right in my backyard. So
I think our first few conversations, I do remember just having conversation, right? Just kind of talking. And it was probably the third one. And I was like, am I supposed to be like saying something by now? Am I supposed to be like breaking down? And then I think it just kind of happened. It was organic. I didn't feel forced by her to talk about anything or to open up about anything, where in the past I had a lot of therapists who, and maybe that was just their way. And maybe that works for some people, right? Well, talk to me about why you're here. Sometimes it's like, well, I'm not ready to talk about that yet. I just need to know that I can trust you first, that I can talk to you about that stuff. And then it was, when I realized I could really kind of say anything to her, and I was like, okay, feeling safe with someone. So it's been almost 2 years. So it'll be 2 years in September.
Yeah. I also want to add that at the beginning, I definitely didn't want to push you, because one of our first sessions, you were actually in transit from North Carolina in a moving truck.
Oh my gosh. I forgot about that.
Yeah. Yeah, you were actually in the process of moving.
That's right. So when I moved from Boston to Charlotte, I moved all my stuff there and put it in storage. And I was only in Charlotte from February until August of 21. And in August, I had family in Tennessee and I moved to Tennessee. But when I went to Tennessee, I didn't bring everything. I just brought stuff for a bedroom because I had somewhere to stay there as well. And the reason I wanted to come on and share this was it's important for me to sort of share with my audience who I am, what I've been through, but with the underlying mental health topic that I think it's something important that I want to continue through the podcast. But how many people have sat down with their therapist and been like, all right, this is what we talk about. So what did you, I don't know, do you remember what you first thought when you met me?
Well, I remember.
Do you ever, I don't know.
When you were moving, you're like, I hope this is okay. And I was like, yeah, just as long as, we put this U-Haul and park somewhere,
Yeah.
I'm not really comfortable with you driving. So just pull over and put it in park and then we'll do our session.
Yeah.
And I think it was a lot about recognizing that you really didn't have a stable roof over your head. And without that security of shelter, it's kind of hard to focus on other things. So I think it was a matter of just, and this is for all my clients, meeting them where they are. So yeah, at the beginning, I think it was just meeting you where you were, building that trusting relationship as you would with any therapist. And then after some other things started to fall into place, I feel like I was able to push you a little bit more. And even now I can tell, today's not the day to push too much. Other days I'm like, okay, today's the day. We're going to push you a little further.
Why do you think so many people are, I know why I was scared to go on an antidepressant, but have you had anyone, and not, obviously you can't, we're not saying names or anything,
Sure.
But have you had situations where people are really terrified to go on an antidepressant or to take medicine?
Yeah, I think any medication in general, there's a lot of different fears. I think people look at it as a weakness, as a failure, and that's not the case. It's a chemical imbalance. I don't care how strong you are, you can't really overcome a chemical imbalance. So I think that people need to recognize that it's not a moral weakness or failure. Maybe the fear of, if I start this, I'll be on it forever. That's another common fear that I hear. There's a million reasons. Unfortunately, healthcare, insurance, financial, that's another reason. But I think a lot of it is feeling like a failure.
Well, yeah, she hit the nail on the head there, because that's how I felt. I felt like I need to be able to get myself out of this. And at the time, I was around a lot of really determined, successful women who were very headstrong and just focused, and they had it together. And I just couldn't get it together. No matter what I did, no matter how much sleep I got, no matter how much water I drank or how healthy I ate, it didn't make a difference. I couldn't get myself out of this funk. I remember even, I was scared to take medicine because I was scared to rely on something for the rest of my life. I started thinking, well, what if I can't get this? What if I lose insurance? And at the time I was doing self-pay insurance, which eventually I couldn't even afford to do that. Mm-hmm. And then it was finding a job, but it was finding a job that I was passionate about, but finding a job where I had health insurance. I don't know how many jobs I looked at on LinkedIn, how many jobs I looked into the description of, but then it's sort of like, well, everything happens for a reason, because I ended up here because of where I worked previously. The restaurant I was in, I walked up to Tammy Shuey at the bar, started talking to her, and Brian, who is starting a podcast of his own and needed some consultation, but then he sort of said, oh, well, you should actually talk to Tammy. So that's how I got here. Now tell me, I know you have a therapist, right?
I do. Of course I have a therapist.
What
kind of therapist doesn't have a therapist?
You've been seeing her for a while now, or your therapist? You've been seeing your therapist for
a couple years.
Yeah. Okay. Have you gone through multiple therapists before? Have you had that experience?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
sometimes, I went to a therapist for a very specific reason, for a specific goal. And, sometimes you want someone that maybe specializes in something, and you do your time with that therapist, and that relationship can come to an end, and that's fine. I tell people all the time, like, I might not be for you. I'm not for everyone, and that's okay. I don't want that responsibility to feel like I need to be the therapist for everyone, but I will absolutely help you find the person that is the right fit for you, because as a therapist, it's really hard to find a therapist. I think it can be intimidating. So I think that finding a therapist that's a good fit for you is so important. And I don't take any offense if someone wants to find a different therapist. It's not offensive at all. I would be more offended if someone decided to just stick it out and they didn't think that I was the right fit. So yes, I have been through multiple therapists for different reasons. And the therapist I see now, I've been with for quite a few years. We have a good relationship, and I feel like she meets my needs. I'm comfortable telling her everything. I'm open, I'm honest, I'm vulnerable with her. So I think finding the right therapist is important.
I mean, that's the biggest thing. I think I got lucky. And what I really liked in particular was that I was able to read, I got to read not just your credentials, but there was like paragraphs.
Like a bio.
But like a pretty significant bio. I mean, sometimes you see a bio that's like maybe just a couple sentences, right? But there was enough about you and a lot of the stuff that you specialize in. And I thought, well, that sounds like me, actually. So, and because you were in the area, that was another reason. And it just felt sort of right. But I do remember having things in my head that I wanted to talk about that I had never talked to anyone about. And then I remember telling you those things. I remember that moment too. I remember going through that, and you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, of course.
And telling you, and I still kind of feel like I can feel your reaction. You were just like, okay. You weren't expecting me to say something like that, were you?
Not.
But I mean, how do you, I guess that's par for the course.
And you always keep me on my toes.
Well then. Oh, I'm sure that I do. So, what we sort of got into last week, and I'm not going to share that because it's personal, right?
Yeah, for sure. And it's so fresh. We haven't even processed it.
But it's something like that. Whenever you realize something and you tell someone like, hey, I think I'm realizing this about you, and I'm almost diagnosing you with this. Oh geez, I don't know. I'm still sitting with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we did briefly talk about whether or not I was going to be transparent about that or not. No one's life is perfect, right? And I think moving back to Butler, for me, I thought I'm moving back to Butler. I'm 42 years old. I've never been married. I don't have kids. And people don't know the history of that either. And what I went through to try to have a kid on my own. And how you should never ask someone, well, why aren't you married? Or why don't you have kids? Or do you still want that? We need to just start taking those kind of questions out of our vocabulary.
Right.
Because you don't know anyone's story. You don't know where. If you ask them, oh, are you married? And they say no. Oh, do you have kids? No. Okay. Moving on.
Or
another question.
Tell me something about yourself.
Yeah.
Tell me about you.
See, that's what I like about you. You're so good at just being like, here's how you could approach it. She has like this gentle way of like approaching situations where I'm like, don't ask me that question. I turn like into like a crazy, like I want people to read my mind sometimes. And I start feeling the emotions and I'm like, don't react off of the emotion. This person doesn't know. And I don't need to give them my whole backstory. But if they ask me and I say, well, that's kind of a sensitive subject actually for me, and they don't respect that, then I'll let them know. Then I will let them know. Then and only then will I let them know. Someone said to me in the last year. Well, if you want to have kids, you better get on that. Thanks, Captain Obvious.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much for
no idea.
I wasn't thinking about it actually, but thank you. So, when it comes to having someone long-term, do you find that, I didn't realize that I still had, I didn't realize there still were going to be moments of like, wow, well, okay, I didn't realize that about myself, like what we had on Friday. Mm-hmm. And yes, I'm being very cryptic because I don't want to share that.
Right.
I don't want to share it. But do you find people that you've had for years that when that happens, that do you notice like a shift with them when something like that happens? Because I feel like because I've talked to you about, I feel very blocked right now. I feel like my energy is blocked. There's something that's like, and we're into like sound baths and Reiki and all that kind of stuff. So if you're into that, cool. If you're not, that's fine too. That's your opinion. But do you find that happens often when you're with clients for like a long period of time?
Yeah.
Or is it just dependent?
It depends. Everyone's so different. But one thing I do notice is this happens so often. Some of the best sessions are someone will, at the end of the session, will have this like breakthrough moment, like we did. And at the end of that session, the client will say, I almost canceled today because I was thinking like, I really don't have anything to talk about. And it's whenever someone comes in thinking that there's nothing they need to discuss, that's whenever the magic really happens, because we get so caught up in, this is my intention, this is my plan, I am hoping to get this out of it. And you set those expectations, but whenever you go in and you're like, all right, well, I really don't have anything, that is whenever I think you're most vulnerable. And that's whenever these things really come out. It's kind of like a moment of, I hate to say weakness, but you let your guard down. You think, I'm good, I'm strong. And it's great because I love people's reaction. They're like, wow, I came here today and I thought this is going to be the longest hour ever. I have nothing to talk about. And I'm like, oh, I love it when someone says that. I'm like, nothing to talk about.
You're like,
I'm like, I'll find something to talk about.
I've definitely had those. I remember when I came to the couple times I came to your office when I was first teaching yoga early. Remember those Wednesday mornings I would teach a 6 a.m. class, and then I'd come meet you at 8, and I'd come in and, when you're leaving a class like that, when you're leaving something, even though I'm not taking the class physically, you still get a bit of an endorphin rush after teaching. So you're more in a positive headspace. And I always thought, was that where I want to be, or do I want to be like in my real headspace that I'm in most of the time that can be very noisy. I think my head can get really noisy, and just a lot of, it's like I need reassurance, right? Because I've always had to be the one to give myself reassurance in a lot of tough situations. And I think that I remember just kind of walking in there and just feeling like, I don't even know. I would feel that feeling, what you just described, that I didn't know what I wanted to talk about or if I had anything to talk about. And every time I'd always end up just like word vomit, so many things.
I guess one thing that was really important, I think, for you, and this is something I do with every client during the first session, I say, have you been to therapy before? And if they have, great. I say, okay, can you tell me something that you really liked about a therapist in the past, or something that you found to be helpful? And then also, was there anything that your previous therapist did that you didn't like or you'd like me to avoid?
I remember you doing that. This episode is brought to you by Butler County District Attorney Richard A. Goldinger, R.W. McDonald & Sons Incorporated, Robert Stevens Jewelers, how do you take something like that when someone's like, hey, I've wanted to, I mean, I legitimately told you when I was in Tennessee, like what I was going to do, right?
Mhm.
Which is why I called my mom and I was like, I'm not okay.
Right.
And I know she heard my voice, and when she heard my voice and she heard when I was like, I'm not okay. I have to rent a U-Haul right now. Like, I'm supposed to work this weekend. I had an extra job on the weekend at a restaurant, and I felt terrible that I was leaving them a month prior to them shutting down for the season. They were on the lake, so they were only open in the summer. And I had to force myself to not care about that, to put myself first, because usually I'm just so worried. I'm like, I can't do that. I committed to this. I have to follow through. And I've started to learn that. But how do you navigate? I mean, how do you take that on and navigate that when someone comes to you and says, hey, this is where I was at, and hi, help me?
Sure. I mean, I think that people know, I mean, you have to disclose in the first session that I am a mandated reporter. Therefore, if you are at risk of harming yourself or others, I have the duty to warn. But it's not like, okay, I think you were feeling a little off in today's session. Now I'm going to call and someone's going to come scoop you up in a van and take you away. There have been a handful of times, luckily only a handful, but there have been a handful of times that someone has needed a higher level of care. And I always try to, and this has been the case for me every time, luckily, knock on wood, you know, I've helped that person to realize it themselves. And then they, you know, we get a treatment team together. Maybe it's a family member or a loved one, and we, you know, get them on their own will to go enter that higher level of care, whatever that looks like. So I've never had to, you know, 302, which is involuntarily commit someone. You know, if the signs are there that they need more than just outpatient therapy, I help them to see that, and they take that step with, you know, some assistance. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's not like you have to worry walking down the street. I self-disclosed something to my therapist, and now someone's going to come like snatch me up.
Going to therapy has helped me have uncomfortable conversations with a lot of people. Mm-hmm. My mom and I have had a lot of breakthroughs since I've moved back. Setting boundaries has been, it's like I don't want to say it's second nature just yet to me. Okay. I don't think I'm there totally fully just yet, because I think I still like.
Depending on the situation.
Like I'll be like, I'm setting a boundary, and I set it, and then I'm like, no.
Maybe I wasn't quite ready for that.
Maybe I wasn't ready for that yet. But understanding what that means, right? Setting a boundary isn't telling someone that like you hate them or that they're the worst person ever. You're just like, listen, I just need, whether it's a matter of like you come home from work and you're like, I need 30 minutes to just decompress. If someone says that to you, like respect that, right?
Right. A boundary is not a consequence for that other person. It's not that they're in trouble for something. It's you set a boundary, not for them, for you, so that you know what the boundary is and that you're protected by that boundary that you put into place.
I mean, the biggest thing that I want to, you know, for people to get out of this, and I was cryptic on a lot of stuff for a lot of reasons, and I think I need to just slowly start to open up to my listeners. But the biggest thing is, if you feel like you need to talk to somebody, give therapy a chance. Like, just give it a try. Trust it enough that you can find someone and know that they're going to help you sort of open these, you know, unlock these doors or open these windows that you didn't even realize were maybe shut or were open, you know, and you're sort of continuing to put yourself into certain situations and how it can affect you and just your overall well-being. I mean, yesterday was a little bit of a weird day for me, even though the sun was out. I was feeling a little down, and I don't know if it's because of, again, kind of the conversation from Friday and how I was like sort of holding on to that word, you know, and what that means. I'm just like on the verge of just saying it, you know, I'm like so close to just being like,
I mean, I still think you can get the point across without disclosing.
it makes sense as to why I react the way that I do. But now it's like, what work do I need to do now to?
I mean, it's almost like getting a diagnosis. Like something feels off. I don't know what it is. I get blood work done. Oh, that's it.
Yep. That's exactly what it feels like. That's exactly what it feels like. And it feels like I now have more work to do. But I think also being in the play is doing that too. It's bringing out a lot of emotions in me.
Sure.
And I've talked to you about that, and we'll talk about that briefly. I am in a play at the Butler Little Theater. It's opening on April 26th. And in the play, my character, Brooke, has a very close relationship. She's an adult now, lives in New York. She's a writer back in California visiting her family about the book that she recently wrote, and to basically tell them like, hey, this is, a book about our family. Spoiler alert, that's the only thing I'm going to tell you about the play. But I have to have a very close relationship with my father. And I didn't realize how hard it was going to be until I actually sat down with the actor, Tom, who plays my father, Lyman, and have this conversation with him. Because I didn't have that. When I was 14, my dad and I were starting to get into that place of like, I could tell my dad anything. I could talk to him about anything. So losing that instantly was like very shocking to my system, but it left me numb. And realizing, I'm going to be working through some of that doing this play. Can I actually do it? And doubting my ability as an actor. And I even told the director one night, I said, hey, I didn't realize, but I'm struggling a little bit with these scenes with Lyman. And she's like, really? And I said, yeah. We're in a theater where my father used to build sets here. I mean, the stage door is dedicated to him. There's a plaque on the door with my dad's name on it. There's a lot of history from me being a kid and coming here, but my dad was always a part of that, as well as my mom. So it can be a space that's it feels like home, right, to me, to be there in the theater, but then to do a play where it's the biggest role I've ever played, one, and two, I have the responsibility of having this relationship, and I'm not sure I can do it because it's making me feel really uncomfortable.
Sure.
But that makes sense with what you said, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I have had to really just separate. I have really had to be like, this is not that. This is not replacing something that you never had.
Right.
Because in a way it felt like, oh my gosh, am I replacing something? Like, that's not what and I don't even know why I felt like that, but I did. And it was tough. I have to say dad. She says daddy a lot, and that was weird. And dad, but that's how that's her relationship with him, right? Mm-hmm. And when you see the play and you understand the characters and what they've been through and what my character in particular had been through, I understand why she talks like that to him, but it's hard because I'm thinking, I don't think I would at this age call my dad daddy. She's in her 30s, but she does. And there are some women that do. So it's finding out why she's like that and understanding that and then portraying that, but making it real, right? And a lot of what I experience in shows, I use a lot of my life experience for, especially this one. It's a comedy, but we'll make you cry too. Mm-hmm. We will make you cry. And we cry.
Okay.
So to get there, to be able to cry on stage, you've got to go to a place. You've got to use stuff. And I got all kinds of stuff to use. I got a lot of emotional stuff to use. I want people to understand that I take people for who they are, where they're at. I don't have a problem with if purple's my favorite color and you hate purple, it's not going to offend me. If you don't like me for whatever reason, I'm at a point in my life where I'm like, okay, like then I can't convince you to like me. And for a long time, I feel like I was definitely, those would be the people I'd hone in on. I'd be like, that person, I'm going to make that person like me. I was like Rose from the Golden Girls. I'm like, I'm going to make them like me, you know? And didn't realize that for whatever reason, sometimes people don't like you and it has nothing to even do with you. And there's that saying, other people's opinions of you are none of your business. And I never understood that. When someone first told me that, I didn't get that, but I get that a lot more now. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I try not to let things bother me. I try not to care too much about other people's opinions, but we're all human. So it's hard not to some degree, right? So I guess it's all about how much energy you allow something like that to take from you. You know, don't totally shut it out, but listen to it and think, you know, how much am I willing to let that come into my life? How much attention should I be giving that? Should it be any? Should it be none? Should it be more? And just kind of having that ability to gauge those different situations.
And this was the last thing that I wanted to share was, you know, because of the breakthrough we had on Friday, I felt like I was in a place where I was like, okay, I'm good. I go to therapy. I have been able to miss, like we would miss a week here or there, you know, based off of different circumstances. But we had that session and that came up and I was like, man, now I got more work to do because I feel like we just totally, it's like layers of an onion, right? I feel like we just peeled a bunch of layers. To realize something like that, a diagnosis like that, and then now I'm like, okay, so now how do we navigate it? And that's just where we're at, right? That's what we're going to maybe talk about on next Friday in my next session.
Yes. But don't look at it as a setback. I feel like look at it as, oh, here's a label to this underlying struggle I've been having. I just didn't really know what to call it. Now I do. Okay, so now we have like a formal diagnosis.
Yeah.
And not for a specific like mental health disorder or anything. We're talking about like a series of events. I mean, I just want to say that I think it's extremely brave of you to do this. And I think you've done some crazy stuff over the course of your life. But I think this deserves to be on that list because while you might just be sitting in a chair here, this is a really big deal. I think you've been very vulnerable, very transparent, and I think it takes a lot of guts, a lot of courage to put yourself out there like you did. So I just want to say, you know, kudos to you for doing this, and I hope that you sharing some of your story can be what it takes for someone else to get the courage to go to therapy, and I think it will.
Well, thank you. That's really kind of you. I don't want anyone who feels alone to convince themselves that that's it, that that's the end all be all. And I think I've reached that point a few times. And that's where I was, that I convinced myself that that was it. And a lot of times it is loving yourself, you know, in order to let someone else, you know, love you. And so that's where I was. And I appreciate you taking time out of your day. She's a hot commodity over here. This one, she's hard to get into. She's like packs her day in. So thank you, Whitney. And, you know, if, you know, Whitney's someone you maybe want to talk to, you could find her. I'll put all of her information. I'll put the link to her private practice. You can go to BetterHelp. We do have that affiliate link for 10% off your first month with BetterHelp. That can just get you started. And again, you can kind of decide how that works for you. For me, I knew that I wanted someone that I could talk to every single week. So whatever that looks like for you, I say go for it. I say do something good for yourself and find someone that you can talk to. Yeah?
Yeah.
You feel good?
I feel good.
Thank you for tuning in to Alter Eagle. Join me every Monday for a new episode. And be sure to click subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Follow us on Instagram at Alter Eagle Podcast. Until next time, stay safe, stay hopeful, stay kind.